Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Devotions. Pastor Dino with you each and every day. By the grace of God, we are continuing this morning. We are in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. I want to welcome all of you on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. God bless you. Thank you for being with us. We will not be covering chapter 7 and chapter 8 only because we've covered the subject matter that's in these two chapters in previous teachings. We dealt with chapter 7 in Romans chapter 6, and the material that's covered in chapter 8 of Corinthians I dealt with in Romans 14. If you want to view those sessions, you can go back and take a look. But today we are in chapter 9, and we'll begin at verse number 19. The Bible tells us, Paul speaking, even though I am free, a free man with no master. And what that means is free from sin, that sin doesn't control me anymore. I'm not a slave to my lust and my passions. God has set me free. That's what Paul means, and that's what happens to every true believer. I have become a slave to all people. Now watch this now. To bring many to Christ. So although I'm free, I got no master over me, I am still a slave, and what that means is I am a servant. I am going to serve certain people to win them to Christ. I'm going to do what I need to do to win them to Christ. And that's why Jesus hung around the prostitutes and some of these people that the Pharisees called them sinners and outcasts. Jesus had a purpose for that. He didn't hang around them to do what they do, but to win them to God. And that's what Paul is saying here, to bring many to Christ. And that's something that you and I need to do. And Paul expands on this a little bit later. He says, when I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. So I'm hanging around the Jews. I'm going to participate. I'm going to do what they do, not sin like they might be sinning, but do the customs and certain idiosyncrasies to connect, to relate. Remember, Paul's Jewish, but to bring them to Christ. So there was a method. There was a purpose why Paul would do these things. And I live like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. That's not hypocrisy. That's being wise. He wants to gain their trust to win them. When I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under the law, even though I am not subject to the law. I do this to bring them to Christ who under the law. And when I am with the Gentiles, I do not follow the Jewish law. I live apart from the law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. So to the Jew, I became a Jew. And to the Greek, I became a Greek. Didn't practice their sins. But so he identified with them to win them. And that we need to learn that. Sometimes we're so self-absorbed and arrogant, perhaps in some of our ways. We say, I'm not going to do that. No way, I'm above that. Or no, Paul says, I'm your servant, so I can win you to Christ. You know, to illustrate this, now I don't drink wine. I don't drink alcohol. I believe the wine was fermented in the Bible. I believe Jesus did not drink grape juice. He drank fermented wine. We see this, it's obvious. Why otherwise why would he would say about the wine that the latter is better, that the wine is good as the wine is waited upon, and as the wine is older, then the wine is better. He left the best for last. We hear this in the wedding at Cana. Well, what would constitute that? Well, the fact that the wine was fermented. The older the wine, the better, because it's fermented. So the wine was fermented. Now, there are some Christians who don't believe that. There are some classical Pentecostal believers who do not believe the wine was fermented. And so there's a schism. And there's been a schism in this for years. I pastored in the Italian Pentecostal assemblies of Canada years ago. And they believe they drink wine with their meals. I come from the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. They do not drink wine. They do not believe any kind of alcohol. And so what do? And so I'm invited to Italian homes, and they might offer me some wine as I drink, and I'll have a cup of wine. No big deal. I'm not going to say to them, because I don't believe it's sin. You see? I'm not going to say, no, I don't touch wine. What are you doing? And trying to almost come across like a self-righteous believer. I'm better than you. No. Partake. As long as you know your conscience is not seared about it. As long as you know it's not wrong. And because I believe the wine was fermented, I had a cup of wine, even though I don't like wine, even though I don't drink wine. And I'm able to connect with them and talk with them and bring them closer to God, if you will. Some of them weren't even saved. You see my point? This is what Paul is saying. It's exactly what he's saying. And we need to do more of that, brothers and sisters. That's what it means. I became a Jew to gain the Jew, a Greek, a Gentile to gain the Gentile. Look what it says in verse 22. For when I am weak with those who are weak, I share their weakness. Now he's not talking about sin, but he doesn't put himself higher than those he's ministering to. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what Paul's saying. I'm your servant. I'm really no better than you. This is an act of humility, friends. An absolute act of humility. For I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone. You see, that's what Jesus did. This is what Paul is suggesting for all of us. We'd be better evangelists if we can do that. Guarantee you can win more souls to Christ if you do that. I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. Do whatever it takes. I do everything to spread the good news and share its blessings. Don't you realize? Now watch this now. And this is where it gets amazing. And this is one of my favorite portions of scriptures. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? Now, back in the day, the Isthmian Games evolved to the Olympic Games. We have the Olympic Games going on right now, the Winter Olympic Games. But the original Olympic Games started as the Isthmian Games, and there were races, there were boxing, wrestling. These were the main events. Only one would win. Today we have 3 prizes. There's the gold, there's silver, and there's bronze medals. But back in that day, there was only one. Just the gold medal, that's it. No second or third place. That evolved later on in the games. So Paul said, don't you realize, you need to understand it, that in this race, everyone runs, but only one gets the prize, so run to win. Now, what Paul is calling the Christian journey, our walk with God, as a race. We also see this in Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 12, Paul speaks, if Paul wrote this, I believe he did. It says in verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded with such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, Paul is talking about an arena. We're running this race in this arena, and there's witnesses. There are people in the crowd cheering you on, like you would at a game, like at the Olympic Games, or like at a hockey game or a baseball game. They're cheering you on. This is the context. Paul spoke a lot about athletics. A lot. Maybe he was an athlete. Maybe he just admired athletics, even though he was a Pharisee back in the day. Look what it says. Let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on the Lord, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. So many things right here, and I speak about this often. Paul's saying, look, he's saying you got to run this race with purpose, like you're going to win. And in order to win this race, there's one prize. You got to train yourself. Look what it says here. I run with purpose. I do not shadow box. He says in verse number 25, all athletes, so we're in this race, we're in this journey, all of us. It says, but only one wins the prize, so you run to win. So you're not going to be, listen, be the best Christian you can be. Don't just serve God haphazardly. Don't live a life of mediocrity. If you're going to be a Christian, be a passionate Christian. Be a strong believer. He says, run this race to win. All athletes are disciplined in training. You can't run this race unless you're disciplined. Why? This is not a sprint. This is a marathon race. If you ever noticed marathon runners versus runners who run, let's say, the 100-meter dash, they got different builds. Those that run the 100-meter dash are more muscular, especially their upper body. Their thighs are much thicker. More muscles are involved. It's a sprint. Different muscles applied. But the marathon runner is much slimmer, less weight, smaller, because this race is about endurance, not speed and power. Different muscles. But to run the marathon race, you have to be extremely disciplined and you must train. Otherwise, you have no hope, no chance to finish this 26-mile race. If you just decided to run this race tomorrow, you'd collapse in the first mile. You wouldn't make it. You're not trained. You got to train yourself. And for training, there's discipline. A marathon runner doesn't train 2 days before the race. He might train a whole year before that race. In this case, 4 years. The Olympic Games are every 4 years, so the marathon runner trains 4 years for that one moment. And it takes extreme discipline. Some of them run miles, 10, 15, 20 miles a day training for that one time. That will take place in 4 years. Incredible discipline. This is what Paul is saying. If you're a Christian, it's going to take training and discipline. You have to live a certain way. And look, it says they do it to win a prize. Look what it says now. That will fade away, but we do it for eternal prize. So these athletes, they do it to win a natural prize. They didn't have gold medals, they had a wreath. They would stand before the judge and they would give them this reward, this wreath. They do it for a natural prize, for a physical prize. But we do it for an eternal purpose. So I run with purpose in every state. I am not just shadow boxing. It's not a game. It's not just something I'm doing, beating air. I'm not just doing this with no purpose, in other words. But I discipline myself, my body like an athlete, training to do what I need to do. Otherwise, I won't make it, he's saying. I'm running this race with discipline. The word to run here in the Greek is the word trecha, which means literally continuous motion. Continuous. We are to run continually. Listen, man, you can't run continually if you're not trained. You'll give up real quick. Train is the Greek word, watch this now, gymnastiki, the English word for gymnasium or gymnastics. Spiritual calisthenics. What do you do in a gym? You train. You exercise. That's what the concept is. This is what Paul is saying. This is what the Greek is saying. We are to train, go through spiritual gymnastics, spiritual calisthenics. The more you train, the stronger you are. The less you train, you won't be equipped, you won't be prepared, you won't make it. It's all in the discipline. The Christian life should be the most disciplined life there is. I don't know if you're hearing me. You need to be disciplined. When Jesus says, when you fast, when you pray, when you give alms in chapter 6 of Matthew, these are the 3 disciplines that we need to do as believers. It takes discipline to be a true believer. I repeat, it takes discipline. That's why some of us don't make it. We're not disciplined. We're not hungry enough. We're not passionate enough. We're not running to win. It que sera mentality. The French, which means whatever is. No, friends, you got to be focused. You're running this race, you got to be focused because there's going to be a lot of trials. It's not easy to run this race. You can get a cramp. You can trip. You can fall. There's all kinds of obstacles and you got to be focused and you've got to train. And the more you train, the stronger you are and the more you can endure. It says, don't let this sin, this weight so easily besets you. King James says, sin will slow you down. So you got to lay aside these weights. That's what training does. The more you train, the stronger you become. You see, sin will weigh you down. You can't run a race if you got 50 pounds extra on your body. You can't run this race even if you got 5 extra pounds. A marathon race, it's going to slow you down. So sin is referred to as extra weight in this context. That training will get rid of that. Training is a picture of being focused and disciplined before God. And if you're not training and you're not disciplined, you're allowing the things of this world to weigh you down. It's like the parable of the sower. Things that will choke you, choke the word. We see a similar idea here in this text. He says, I discipline my body, training to do what I should do. And Paul says this over and over again. Notice in verse 7 of chapter 4, 1 Timothy, a powerful text, it says, do not waste your time with godless ideas and wives' fables. Verse 8, physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising its benefits in this life and the life to come. Spiritual training. Did you see that? So physical training is good. It's good to get in shape physically, but it's better to get in shape spiritually. 1 Timothy 4, 7, and 8. And we do this. There's a physical training that we go through that will help us endure. So as Paul is speaking about the physical realm, we need to physically work out for this physical race, the marathon. This also applies spiritually because we're in a race spiritually as well. So he's using the physical marathon, that race, to depict and give a parallel to our race in the spirit realm. Listen, friends, it's a marathon. Our journey is not just a couple of days. He that endures to the end shall be saved, Jesus said. This is what Paul is saying. They all go together. We must be training. Friends, that's the difference between being strong or being weak. It's in your training. Are you training? Are you focused? Are you occupying until he comes? Are you redeeming the time? That's all part of your training. And here comes a very sobering thought, and I close with this. I discipline my body like an athlete, training to do what I should do. Otherwise, I fear. Did you see that? I fear. I fear. I'm fearing something. What does Paul say in Colossians 2:23? He says the same thing. Work willingly, and whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Did you see that? Colossians, and then it says in chapter 20 and chapter 2, look what it says here. It says, these rules may seem wise because they require strong devotion, plus self-denial and severe bodily discipline. Colossians 2:23. Discipline. We see this everywhere. Paul speaks about spiritual discipline. If you don't have it, you're not going to endure. You won't make it. You won't make it. Why is it some Christians start so well, they lift up their hands and everything's excited, they're praising God, but they fade away? They're not disciplined. They're not training. Does not Paul say in 1 Timothy, in the last days, many shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits? They're not training. They're not focused. They give up too easily. Look what he says. Be careful. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Excuse me? You, the Apostle Paul, might be disqualified? I got to read that again. I discipline my body like an athlete, training to do what I should do. Otherwise, I fear. Paul saying, I'm fear. This is what I fear. This is sobering. I wonder if you fear that. Do I fear this? What is it I'm fear? That after preaching, I myself might be disqualified. I got to be careful. I'm telling you to run this race, but I got to be careful that I'm running this race. Because if I don't, if I'm not training myself, are you listening, friend? If I'm going to be disqualified. Disqualified. Look, friends, what Paul is saying, those who are disqualified from this particular running event have no hope for winning the prize. If you're disqualified, you got no hope. Do you see? No hope. None whatsoever. To avoid losing the eternal prize, Paul's disciplined himself severely like an athlete so that he would not be led astray from Christ into a life of sin, meaning he'd be disqualified, meaning he wouldn't make it. No sin enters into heaven. Friends, I'm going to say it. Is it possible to lose your salvation? Well, according to this text, it seems that you can. Now you think about it. You're running that race. That means you're saved. You're a believer. You're in the race. You're running. You're in the marathon. But you can be disqualified because of sin. Because of no training. Did you see that? He that endures to the end shall be saved. Oh, this is sobering, friend. Are you running the race? Are you in training? Are you seeking God? Are you putting Him first? Are you crying out? Friends, this is a daily act. Self-denial is daily activity. This is what Paul is saying. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, you got to deny yourself. So this teaching today about this I call it goosebump, hot tub Christianity. Yeah, just feel good, easy believing. Friends, that's not the gospel. This is a synthetic gospel. The gospel, the truth is that we're in a race. It's long term. We need to train. We don't earn our salvation. We don't train because we want to earn our salvation. No. It's nothing about earning. We can't earn it. But when you're saved and you experience His grace, there's a responsibility you and I have to do. And Paul says in Philippians, you got to work out your salvation. That's what training's all about. The stronger you train, the better you run, so you can finish the race. I pray that that's you. I pray, friends, that you are truly keeping your eyes on Him. That's what it says in Hebrews. That's what gives you the capacity to train. Keep your eyes on Him, and you won't fall. I thank you, Father, for your word. I give you praise for your goodness. Help us, Lord, to be good trainers, good runners. Help us to endure to the end. For there's so many things that would try to dissuade us and trip us up, Lord. Give us eyes to keep focused on you. And give us a heart that's filled with you. David said, enlarge my heart, O Lord, that I might run unto you. Did you see that? Lord, enlarge my heart that I might run. Praise God. I pray that you're a good runner. Keep running, my friend. Not away from God, but towards Him. To God be the praise. God bless you. And we hope to see you again tomorrow, Lord willing. Bye for now.